Let's talk about cryptocurrency and crime. You've probably heard the two mentioned in this same breath a million times. But the real story? It's this high-tech, totally fascinating game of cat and mouse, where the very same technology the criminals are using is also the key to bringing them down. So let's dive into how this all got started. It all kicks off with this really powerful, almost philosophical idea. What if? What if you could build a marketplace where anyone could buy and sell anything they wanted, completely outside the control of any government, any bank? A market based on just pure economic freedom. Okay, so for a radical idea like that to work, you'd need a pretty special kind of money, right? Something anonymous, encrypted, something that couldn't just be shut down by a central authority. And what do you know? Back in 2011, the perfect thing had just shown up: Bitcoin. It was the digital cash that could finally make this wild experiment happen. So you take this anonymous marketplace, you add this new anonymous currency, and boom, you've created something the world had literally never seen before. For better or for worse, this proved that Bitcoin had a real powerful use in the world. In fact, you could say it became Bitcoin's very first killer app. And that killer app? It was an infamous website called Silk Road. It launched back in 2011, and it lived on the dark web. You know, that part of the internet you need special software like Tor to get to, where everything is super anonymous? It was basically the eBay for the internet's underworld. And honestly, it's what put Bitcoin on the map for a lot of people. You know, the founder, Ross Ulbricht, he claimed his reasons were all about philosophy. He said he just wanted to give people the freedom to make their own choices. But as you can see from his own words, he later had to admit that the reality of what he built was something, well, something very different and a lot more dangerous. And the whole thing happened so fast. I mean, look at this timeline. It goes from this obscure little site to a huge mainstream story in just a matter of months. But its downfall was just as quick. Less than 3 years after it started, the FBI shut it all down. And Ulbricht ended up with a sentence that was harsher than what some of the world's worst criminals get. So, here's the big question, right? In a marketplace built on total anonymity, how in the world do you get anyone to trust each other? It's not like you can call a customer service line if your illegal package doesn't arrive. Well, they came up with a pretty clever system to try and solve exactly that problem. The system they came up with is actually kind of brilliant. It's called a 2 of 3 multi-signature escrow. Think of it like this. A buyer puts their Bitcoin into a special wallet that's like a digital safe deposit box. Now, to open that box and pay the seller, you need 2 out of 3 keys. The buyer has one, the seller has one, and the market's administrator holds that all-important third key. On paper, this sounds foolproof, right? No one person can just take the money and run. But in practice, well, it created one giant weakness, because that market administrator holds the deciding vote in every single transaction. They become a huge central point of failure. If that admin decides to just disappear, they can approve every single payment to themselves and steal millions. That's what the community calls an exit scam. But darknet markets? That was really just the beginning of the story. As the cops started cracking down on those, the criminals just evolved. They moved on to even more disruptive stuff, like these high-stakes ransomware attacks. And there is no better example of this than the attack on the Colonial Pipeline. So picture this. May 7th, 2021. A group calling themselves DarkSide does something nobody thought was possible. They used ransomware to shut down the Colonial Pipeline. This is a massive piece of infrastructure. It supplies almost half the fuel for the entire U.S. East Coast. And the attack caused total chaos in the real world. Panic buying, gas stations running dry. It was a mess. So the attackers made their demand. To get the oil flowing again, Colonial Pipeline had to pay. And the currency of choice was, you guessed it, Bitcoin. The price? A clean 75 BTC. Now, at that moment, those 75 Bitcoin were worth an absolutely staggering 4.4 million US dollars. Colonial Pipeline paid it, hoping that would be the end of the crisis. But for the hackers, this was just the start of their payday. Okay, but this is where the plot twist comes in. The very technology the criminals were banking on, the blockchain, is also a public, permanent record of every transaction. It's a digital trail of breadcrumbs that can't be deleted. And if you know how to read it, you can follow the money. And this is a perfect play-by-play of how the FBI did exactly that. They watched in real time as the 75 Bitcoin payment was made. Then, they just followed the money on the public blockchain as the dark side leaders took their 15% cut and sent the rest, about 63.7 Bitcoin, over to the person who actually did the hack. By following that trail, they found the hacker's wallet, and then, in this incredible move, they actually got control of the private keys, the secret password for that wallet. And the result of all that digital detective work, the Department of Justice announced they had gotten back a huge chunk of the ransom, $2.3 million worth of Bitcoin. It was a massive victory for law enforcement, and it proved that crypto is definitely not the anonymous safe haven for criminals that so many people think it is. Now, an attack like the Colonial Pipeline, that makes big headlines. But honestly, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath these huge cases, there's this sprawling, everyday criminal economy on the dark web, a gigantic market for stolen data. A study from 2020 gives us a pretty good snapshot of what this looks like. And just look at the scale of it. These are not small-time operations. Major markets like DeepSea and Icarus each had over 4,000 active listings for stolen data. That's thousands of different stolen items for sale on just one website. So what are they actually selling? Well, it's a whole range of digital contraband. The biggest piece of the pie, over 40%, is just general data, things like hacked Netflix accounts or entire company databases. But you can also buy credit card numbers, how-to guides for hacking, and even templates to make fake passports. It's basically a one-stop shop for cybercrime. But here's something you might not expect. This huge criminal marketplace, it isn't run by one big kingpin. Research shows that almost 80% of the sellers stick to just one market. That tells us the whole system is really fragmented, with lots of smaller platforms all competing with each other. It makes it harder for law enforcement to just take out one or two big players and shut the whole thing down. So, because the criminals are constantly evolving, a powerful new industry has popped up on the side of justice. We are witnessing the rise of the crypto detectives, a whole sector of companies whose job is to police the blockchain. You've got these companies like Chainalysis and Elliptic, and they're building these incredibly powerful tools to help law enforcement fight back. We're talking about tracing illicit funds just like the FBI did, only way faster. They can monitor transactions in real time to flag shady activity right when it happens. They can even check a crypto wallet's history to see how risky it is before a bank deals with it. They are seriously leveling the playing field. Which brings us all the way back to the central question, doesn't it? Is cryptocurrency fundamentally a tool for criminals, or can it actually be a powerful tool for justice? It seems like the answer is, well, it's both. And that's the ultimate paradox in all of this. The blockchain's greatest strength for criminals, the ability to move money outside the system, is also its greatest weakness. Every single transaction creates a permanent, undeniable public breadcrumb trail. It really is a cat and mouse game, and it's all being played out on an unforgettable ledger.